Hello, and welcome to today's NorCal Business Aviation Association webinar. My name is Lindsay, and I'll be the producer for today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of this webinar platform. We will be accepting questions for a panelist Q&A session later in the program. You can submit a question at any time via the Q&A window on your screen. We will attempt to address as many of the questions as possible, but often have more questions than we have time to address. We will review all unanswered questions after the event and do our best to answer them on the NorCal BAA website. Please keep in mind that all questions submitted are hidden from other members of the audience and are only viewed by the panelists. With that, I will hand it over to our moderator for today's discussion, Bank OZK's VP of Aviation and NCBAA's President, Craig Bowers.
Thank you, Lindsay, and good morning, everyone. Thrilled to have you with us here this morning. As most of you have probably seen, sustainability and the use of SAF has caught a lot of headlines, or has been certainly in the press a lot lately. And in our continuing effort to connect, inform, and grow our community, we thought it made sense to try and put something of a regional flavor to what's going on in this increasingly important and increasingly present part of the industry in which we all operate. And so with that, we're pleased to kick off this next series in our webinar series program around sustainability planning, and then a key piece of that being sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, as you'll hear more about. So over the next few weeks, we are going to have 4 of these right now. It could grow a little bit. And there's a calendar on our website that talks about what we have planned and what's coming up. While you take a look at that, we're going to try and get a little bit better feel, both for our panelists and for us at NorCal, on just what the audience makeup is for our webinar today. So Lindsay, if you'll go ahead and roll the first polling question. Again, this just kind of helps us get a sense for who's out there and who's attending, and what the situation is for within your flight department. So you'll notice there should be an open poll here. Just tell us a little bit about 91, 135, both, or you don't have a flight department. You're from a company that doesn't necessarily operate airplanes directly, and that'll help us out. So in taking a look at this, unfortunately, we can't show you what the results are, but it looks like 91 only is about just a bit over half. About a third operate both 91 and 135, and about 20% or so are not directly involved in a flight department. So that's good to know, and it helps us and helps the panelists. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce for you today, or give you an idea of what we're gonna be talking about. First, we're gonna hear from Kerri Russi at Adobe. She's the cabin safety manager, and recently, although it maybe seems recent, but for Kerri it probably seems like a longer than just recently, has been developing a sustainability plan for Adobe. And then we'll also be joined by John Hatfield at Cox Enterprises, who can talk a bit more about what their experience was and has been, and put a few of the myths to bed. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to Kerri. And Kerri is going to talk to us a little bit about her experience at Adobe and some lessons learned, and kind of tee up the conversation going forward throughout the series from that. So with that, over to you, Kerri.
Craig, and thank you to everyone for tuning in today to hear a little bit about sustainability. I'll preface by saying I don't know that I'm going to have any new or profound information. having some technical issues? I'm going to turn my camera off. About my background, I have been in corporate aviation for about 13 years. Worked as a contract flight attendant for many of the flight departments in the Bay Area, and I have been lead flight attendant for a couple of corporate flight departments. I'm currently, as Craig said, working for Adobe Aviation out of San Jose. I've been with them since December of last year, and when I came on board at Adobe, I was asked to take the lead on our sustainability initiative. And that was what prompted my journey into sustainability. My first their current level of involvement was. And I found out that Adobe was not only very passionate about sustainability, but they were putting their words into action and really saw it as a responsibility initiative. And they committed to being more sustainable in everything they do. Everything from building sustainable office buildings to tracking and reporting and neutralizing emissions produced by employees commuting to and from work. So once I was able to wrap my brain around that, my next task, so to speak, was to create a mission statement for our sustainability plan. I really wanted to put energy into creating a mission statement that aligned with our company values, as well as our flight department values, and as well as business aviation industry goals. From there, I really focused energy on seeking out new information and networking within the industry. I think I probably annoyed everyone with all my questions. Every time I met someone new in the industry, I would make a point of asking them, do you have a sustainability plan? Do you know another flight department that does have a sustainability plan? Or do you know where I can get more info or information around sustainability? In seeking out that guidance and direction, it's really allowed me to, or helped me to organize the information in a way to just build an outline that, or set some big picture goals for us to really build off of and just get started on a plan of action. So I will go to our next slide, which is, this is essentially a template for a sustainability outline that you guys can use to begin creating your own sustainability plan. Example of a really simple outline for you to build on, and you can add your own details to it and expand on whatever bullet points are really important to your flight department or your company. Just so you know, this template is actually available in the handout section of the webinar. So if you want to download it and use it to build your own sustainability plan, it's there for you to use. You'll notice on the outline that I've got the first 4 bullets highlighted in red. And I wanted to highlight those because IBAC and MBAA Fueling the Future Guide have identified what they call 4 pillars of aviation sustainability development. And so those 4 pillars include technology, staff, environmental or market-based measures, and sustainability for functional groups or efficient flight operations. I have added a 5th topic at the end of our outline, and I just really wanted to create some space with that 5th topic, which is economic impact. I wanted to create space for our department to allow or add information around any potential return on investment there might be in this sustainability planning. So I am going to go to our next slide. So before I get started on this slide, I actually need to give credit for this slide to NBAA. And this actually came right out of their Fueling the Future guide. And I thought it just really simply outlined those 4 pillars that they discussed. And so the first pillar or bucket that you want to think about is technology. And as we know, manufacturers are constantly developing, creating, and innovating more efficient engines, avionics, and aircraft parts that can help us move towards our company and flight department sustainability goals. As we know, these are all big ticket, big spend items, but my hope is that the executives or your flight department will really look at these as long-term investments that will help ensure success of your long-term sustainability goals. And if there's any aviation directors listening in, if you're not doing this already, I would make a suggestion that you highlight sustainability if that's important to your company, but you can highlight sustainability as a business justification for fleet modernization or any equipment upgrades that you think may be valuable in the future. The second pillar that NBAA and IBAC have identified is SAF. We've all heard a lot about SAF, and I'm actually not going to spend too much time on SAF, mainly because I'm not an expert, but also I know that John is going to be able to speak a little bit more to this. And also NCBAA has a webinar coming up on the 18th that is entirely devoted to SAF. So if you want some more in-depth info or expertise around SAF, tune in on the 18th and you can get more details there. For our purposes, I'll just mention that it's the North Star of our sustainability plan, and it's the biggest piece of the pie and our biggest goal. It also presents the biggest challenges right now because we just don't have the infrastructure or supply chain needed to get SAF to many locations in the United States right now. Our third pillar or bucket is operations and infrastructure. When you're discussing this section in your outline, this is your opportunity to highlight any operational shifts that might be able to be made that will help you operate in a more sustainable way. This would be anything from reduced APU times to more efficient flight planning and routing to something as simple as going paperless or digital wherever possible. If you have to work for a company that owns the hangar that your aircraft are in, then this would be your opportunity to highlight any modifications or upgrades to those hangars that may help you operate more sustainably. And I'm actually I've got another slide that goes a little bit functional group can take to operate more sustainably, but before I get to that slide, I'll talk a little bit about market-based measures, which is the fourth pillar of aviation sustainability development. So what are market-based measures? NBAA has defined those as policy instruments which place a cost on carbon emissions, and some examples of market-based measures would be levies, cap and trade, or carbon offsets. Carbon offsets are currently the primary market-based measure that is being used in general aviation. And carbon offsets are essentially subsidizing or offset another company to be more sustainable on your behalf. It's important to note that not all offsets are created equal. Some have more integrity than others. Some are more auditable than others. In a perfect offset world, you would be able to purchase offsets that directly impact your industry or your cause. The bad news is, right now, I'm aware of, we don't have any offsets available that currently help our cause. The good news is that we will in the very near future, and that is why I'm really excited about Book and Claim. Some of you have heard of Book and Claim. If you're not familiar with what it is, it allows aircraft that are not in a location where SAF is available to purchase or book SAF for an aircraft in a location where SAF is available. That other aircraft would then purchase conventional Jet A fuel for your aircraft. And because you purchased the SAF, you get to claim those benefits. And so I'm not sure if there's any tax benefits or tax write-offs that they're projecting, but you will get the benefits of a reduction in carbon footprint and a reduction in the amount of offsets you might potentially need to purchase to neutralize your emissions. Another benefit of Book and Claim is that it will help fuel providers track demand with real statistics and true metrics. So if we all participate in this and consistently participate in this program, then they will really be able to see the demand for that and see that it can be profitable for them. So said I was going to circle back to operations and infrastructure. So I've outlined some ideas that each functional group can begin making today. And I won't go through each bullet point, but I will highlight a few of these that I think apply to every functional group. One would be going paperless or digital wherever possible. Another one is trying to implement a recycling program of some sort, whether it be a hangar recycling program, or if you have the space and desire to recycle while you're in flight. Another thing all functional groups can do is ask for SAF at every FBO that you go to. Even if you know that FBO doesn't have SAF, just ask for it to start putting it on their radar, and again, creating that demand. If we can show the demand, then hopefully that might expedite the innovation and infrastructure changes that we need to get SAF to more locations. Another idea all functional groups can do is transition any traditionally throwaway paper products to either reusable or compostable products. And then most importantly, I would say that it's important for all of us to share information within the industry. And just, you know, continue to talk about it and share ideas. Hold on 1 second. I'm having a technical difficulty. So, perfect. I will go to our next slide. So I mentioned a little bit ago that I created a section for us to discuss the potential economic impact. And like I said, I really just wanted to create some space for us to address any potential return on investment. And so here are just a few ideas that we have right now. So more cost-efficient catering due to waste reduction, potential for reduced fuel consumption, and potential for reduced engine and APU wear if we are reducing our APU times. And a little bit about, I'll share a little bit about Adobe is right now in our current sustainability outline. So we were able to be carbon neutral for our 2019 fuel usage through the purchase of offsets. We're currently in progress on most of our objectives, and we have transitioned any throwaway items in the galley or in the cabin to either reusable or compostable items. We have gone digital wherever we possibly can, everything from menus to manuals and everything in between. We are consciously asking for SAF everywhere we go, and actually highlighting that as part of our decision-making process when we choose an FBO. And we're also actively collaborating with our peers in the industry. Strategists. So we're actively collaborating with headquarters to meet our sustainability goals. So now I would like to take a poll. Give me just a minute.
Yeah, so Kerri, I'm back up on. This is Craig.
Okay.
And yep. And I think we were going to have. Go ahead, Kerri.
Oh, I was just going to say I didn't see the poll question.
Yeah, if I think what we'll do is go ahead and have. It looks like Lindsay has launch that poll around sustainability plan. And okay. Kerri, stick with us here just 1 minute. I think you had a little bit of an audio break there, but it sounds like it's good now. So that poll is running.
Okay.
And this is asking the audience with respect to a sustainability plan, which best describes you. And it looks like about a quarter of the attendees have one in place. So I guess first off, not a member of a flight department is about 30% of the people out there. So of the remaining 70%, 20% have one in place, and another 30% are considered or are developing or are actually in work. And then just about 10% or so either have not considered or don't have one in place at all. So it kind of gives a flavor that this is, it certainly is topical and current, and people are looking at this in terms of the flight departments that are represented within the NorCal community. So that's good to know, and good to kind of highlight there. One of the things you mentioned, Kerri, and I wanted to just remind the audience that there's some questions that have been coming in. That's great. We're about to go to our second panelist here, and then at the end, both Kerri and John will be on for questions. So please keep the questions coming in. Kerri did mention about some of the supply chain limitations on SAF. If you have the opportunity and you're able to join us for some of the follow-on webinars around sustainability and SAF, we're going to talk about that to some degree. There's actually a lot happening in Northern California with some of the larger FBOs around the globe, so we think that'll be of interest to you. We're going to dig a little bit more. We've had a couple questions come in on book and claim. We're going to get into that more in a follow-on webinar as well. So keep the questions coming, and great to kind of hear what you're interested in and what you want to know about. So with that, Kerri, I think you were going to touch on, you mentioned kind of the collaboration and communicating with folks in the industry, and if you want to just do a little bit of a lead into John and how you were introduced to him, that's great, and then we'll ask John to join us.
Sure, and I apologize, I'm having some bandwidth issues, so I'll turn off my camera again. But yes, as I mentioned, the importance of just sharing information and networking within the industry. And when I took on this project, I started bugging one of our vendors. We use a vendor called Shockwave Aviation to help us with our CORSIA and some of our emissions tracking. And so I started asking them about SAF and sustainability, and they were able to connect me with a couple of people, one being John Benjamin from 3M Aviation, and John Hatfield, our next presenter from Cox Aviation in Atlanta. And John was very generous with his time and patient with my questions, and he was very helpful and offered some great direction on where I could get started in building my own sustainability plan. And I'm really excited that he has made some time to share with our Northern California group and offer some experience and insights into what his department is doing around SAF and sustainability.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And with that, we'll go ahead and ask John to turn on his camera and join us here. It looks like he's loading up there, so all good. While John is coming on the scene, I will remind the audience out there that in there's a communication window over in the handouts tab. You'll find a couple of things that we put in there. The slide decks have not been loaded just due to some copyright issues with both Adobe and Cox. So while the slide handouts aren't there, certainly you can connect with either John or Kerri, and we can help facilitate that if you're interested. As well as there are some handouts we're putting in, and one that was just loaded is a SAF fuel guide, which is really quite helpful. A little bit of a soup to nuts drill down on SAF in particular. So with that, John, I don't see you on the webcam, but hopefully your audio is good.
Okay.
And we'll go ahead. There you go. I can hear you, and it's all yours, John Hatfield.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for the intro, and thanks, Kerri, for opening that up. Hopefully you can all hear me. I've just got a thumbs up that the camera's working. So I only have 2 slides, so I'll keep it brief. But this is an important topic, and I'm honored to have the chance to share our story and what we're doing at Cox Aviation. This is an important topic in our industry. I think everyone can agree in the trade magazines that we see today that one month it's about eVTOL and what's going on in urban air mobility, and the other month it's about SAF or what's happening in the sustainable space. So important subject, and certainly one that we need to continue the narrative and the conversation. So I'll start with just briefly. And again, to Craig's point, I will make myself available online or offline if people want to connect and hear more. So our story is a little bit different than Adobe. It starts is a little less formal. Our chairman and CEO are very environmentally conscious and driven, and they put an ask out to our executive team, which Aviation falls under, and asked us to, what can we do? What when we think about our businesses, when we think about our operations, when we think about the things we do every day, what can we do to make a positive impact on the environment? So we have a pretty aggressive Cox Conserves division that looks at everything we do, recycling and energy consumption. But in aviation, I felt, so zero waste to landfills in 2024, and as you can see, carbon and waste water neutral by 2044. The first one is already well underway. The second one requires a whole lot more initiative and innovative thinking. So the ask was, what can we do as leaders to contribute to our objectives? Aviation, I really sat back and I thought long and hard. Paperless cockpits are certainly a thing of today's technology, very doable. The new capabilities with airplanes and the internet system, so we don't have to have newspapers and things like that. But I felt that was just very light in what the ask was. And so I started doing some research, and much like most of you have probably attempted, and I know when I talked with Kerri and several other departments directors that have reached out, when I was asking the questions, there were no answers. It was a very immature, wasn't a well-developed, advanced narrative yet. There were more questions than answers. And so I saw that as an opportunity to seek and go find answers, and being very curious about what this is all about. And so we went a little deeper into it. And then I ran into this thing called biofuel in the early stages of this. And this is about 1.5 years ago, and which has now matured to sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. And so when I began to learn what it was and what it isn't, it really began to answer a lot of the questions. And so the next slide here I'll share, and this is the last slide, is, I heard things like sustainable aviation is unsafe. It's going to hurt the engines. It's going to, take on more properties of water. It's outrageously expensive. It's not affordable. And then even if you wanted it, you can't get it. Well, my research and working my way through the channels, I found all three of those myths to be false. And so the first part is the sustainable aviation fuel is unsafe. And there, I had a question in there that popped up earlier about, what were the concerns? Well, sustainable aviation fuel is very safe, and chemically it is still Jet A, and it's been around for a long, long time. The OEMs have been researching and using this for years. We happen to operate a fleet of Gulfstreams, and when I started talking with Gulfstream, when the airplane's produced and it hits the flight line for a production test flight, it's flying on SAF from day one, the day the airplane's born. David Khalil, formerly with Bombardier, same thing. So the OEMs have been using it for a very, very long time, and it's just becoming new to our industry as it comes into the conversation. The other part is that there was an article that was written in one of the trade magazines that said it's 7 times the price of regular Jet A. That is not an accurate statement. And I have we have been using SAF since last year, since 2019. And we've taken about a dozen or so loads of SAF delivered to our fuel farm at our home base. And so it is not twice or 7 times the price. And then the supply chain is the other piece that is a little bit more complicated, but it is available. Today, World Energy is the only manufacturer, today in the United States, out of California. But there is supply chain channels through trucking and rail to get the fuel. World Energy ships it directly to Savannah, Georgia, via rail. It's getting shipped all over. There's most recently, the last 30 to 45 days, they've announced another couple of refineries are coming online here in the United States. Europe has just announced another refinery coming online there. So it's becoming more and more conversational and more real. The supersonic business jet, the Aviation, is being built and test flown. The plans are to test fly it on SAF. And so when that aircraft comes to market, it will have all of the attributes and things that forevermore in the SAF channels. So, part of this is, as I said earlier, SAF is Jet A. And when it comes off the pipe, and I won't make this a chemistry class because I barely passed it in high school, but at the end of the day, SAF is Jet A. And there's three kinds. There's 70-30 blend, 80-20 blend, or 90-10 blend. And the lower number is obviously the bio component of the Jet A, so of the mixture. And so the 70, to have the most impact, is the 70-30 because 30% is bio and the 70 is straight Jet A. Well, I was satisfied with that to a point. That solves 30% of the challenge. And the ask is, how do we become carbon neutral? And so in that space, I wanted to solve the 70% problem. And so there was a question earlier that I saw about cap and trade or book and claim, rather, and offsets. Well, there is a way. And we are, I am proud, and Cox is glad to say, we are 100% carbon neutral in our aviation department. And we solve the 70% problem because that is still pure Jet A, and we still buy transient fuel on the road. So that fuel is we calculate that in volume, and that volume is gallons, which equates a carbon footprint. And so we use a company out of California called Carbon Lighthouse, and we go to them, and there's some programs that allow them to go to the open auction market, and they basically put caps on dirty coal or your coal burning plants and limit them to the amount of energy that they can produce. And they have to sell those credits. Well, the carbon offset credits that you can Google or buy on the internet today, I wanted to make sure that we had a real impact on our initiative. And whether those are going to be trees at a playground or trees on a ranch, I didn't feel that was auditable or could pass the actual test to sit before our executive team and say, look, we're spending X amount of dollars on this initiative, but we're only solving 30% of the problem. So the 70% is solved through our partnership with Carbon Lighthouse, and then they go to the market, and then they help us by buying actual limiting carbon footprint emissions through capping the coal plant production. So we back to the number of gallons that we burn that is non-SAF and the 70%, those two numbers combined equals a certain number of carbon tons, and then we go and purchase the equal amount in the system. So that's how we're able to achieve 100% carbon neutrality. Are we experts at it? No. I still have more questions, but I still, work my way through, networking and asking more questions. I was super excited to see more and more refineries coming online, and so that means that the demand is going up. There was a point in Kerri's slides that talked about supply and asking for it. It's up to us. We have to ask for it and show that there's the demand. If there's and supply is, you all understand the supply demand equation 101, but if there's a demand and we can get more suppliers, then the price points are going to come down. So fuel under the current economic model, fuel is as cheap as it's been in years and years. So I see this as a great opportunity for companies to step into a SAF conversation. explore with it, and your bottom line is really not going to be affected, because when we all did our budgets in 2019, fuel was substantially more expensive than it is today. So that's kind of really what I have to present. I want to make sure I leave some time for Q&A, because I was on that side of the conversation not that long ago, and it's really, it's really unsettling. Most public companies today have a sustainability statement in their from their board of directors that they have to present, and so by being able to talk about this and get it out, flight departments are, aviation, being involved with MBA for many years, it's our chance to punch back, and we can punch back in the sense of we're being responsible, and we're having good conversations about the environment. And so I'll turn it back to the moderators, and happy to answer any questions.
Very good, very good. Kerri's back on, very good. We're all learning how to bring the cameras on and off. That's like the first test of a webinar. So great panelists, flying colors. With that, I'll just encourage the audience again. Can you hear me all right? It sounds like John. Kerri, can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So we've got Kerri. It looks like we may have lost John for a minute, so we'll have Lindsay kind of work with him to get him back on, and I am going to work here, Kerri, with some questions that have come in that are kind of geared towards. They were kind of aimed towards you. So here's one. How far along does a department sustainability plan need to be before you start seeing results, or before it begins taking action? So I think the idea there is you put this thing in place. When do you start seeing some results out of it?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I started out thinking like I had to have this whole sort of master plan perfectly detailed out before we started taking action on it. And then I got to a point where I just realized this was going to be a living document, a living project. It was going to change month to month and year to year as new information came in. And so I would say as soon as you have some ideas of ways that your flight department can operate more sustainably or push this initiative forward, I would say take action on that immediately. There's no need to wait. Just be sure to document what you're doing so you can tell your executives about it, and also share new ideas and information with the rest of the industry so we can all learn from one another.
Now, and a follow-on to that, Kerri, so in an organization, I realize this is probably, it's very much company specific, but in an organization like Adobe, I'm assuming there is a larger enterprise-wide sustainability. In fact, John alluded to it at Cox. And is that, I'm going to, again, kind of assume here, that's an office or a department or an individual that you work pretty closely with. Is that a week to week or month to month, quarter to quarter kind of thing? Or do you find you're pretty much tied at the hip in working this thing through?
For me, at Adobe, it is more of a, I would say on average, quarterly check-in. So we do have a sustainability. Adobe is sustainable in everything we do. What I have found is that aviation is kind of this new idea or new thing for corporate sustainability strategists. So we have to collaborate to sort of educate one another. They educate me on sustainability. I tell them what the aviation landscape looks like, and then, basically share ideas. I haven't felt like I've been micromanaged in any way. It's just been really helpful information. And my sense is that they're really looking to us to them as much as they are educating us about sustainability.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. John, it looks like you're back with us and good, hopefully good audio. There's a thumbs up. I'll point this one in your direction. And you don't, I'll preface this by saying, don't feel obliged to comment on Cox fleet planning unless you want to. But in conversations that you've had, either internally or externally, how about that? Have you seen where you get the sense that the drive for a more sustainable flight operational environment is driving, let's just say, fleet changes, smaller aircraft, more offload for shorter legs, possibly to third-party lift, rearrange fleet planning, buying and selling of aircraft?
Sure.
Do you see anything like that? Do you get a sense that that's out there, or not so much yet?
Yeah, great question. I think it's part of the conversation, and I'm happy to if anyone wants to talk offline. I mean, with regards to fleet planning, I think it's important about it. Look, if you're operating, I mean, we all can say the real gas guzzlers that we've seen in our industry are pretty much been phased out. And that was driven by noise more than it was fuel. So, but the OEMs are very attuned to making comparisons when they do fleet analysis between models, competing models in the same, mission profile. There's a segment in there that talks about speed and time, and fuel burn. And, it's interesting to watch, because as we see these new aircraft coming online, the Pratt and Whitneys, the Honeywells, and the Rolls Royces of the world are very attuned to sharing what fuel efficiencies they're gaining in producing the same amount of thrust or more for the speeds that are being asked for. So I think it's part of the conversation. I don't think anyone's making a decision, well, this airplane burns this less amount of gas than this airplane does, so let's go with this one. I think it's being more driven by the mission need, but the fuel conversation is part of it.
It is a part of it, definitely. Okay. A couple notes I'll touch on. We have a couple more questions, but a couple notes I'll just cover. I mentioned about the slide presentations. While the presentations, the decks themselves are not posted, we have put both Kerri and John's email in the public chat window. So please reach out to them. No solicitations for selling products. We be trying to sell them stuff, but you're welcome to reach out to them to find out more about what they're doing, or what they've come across, or what their experience, whatever. So their email address there available to you in the public chat. There was a question that came in on book and claim and the carbon offsets, carbon neutral credit programs. I just wanted to kind of throw out a shameless plug. We are going to drill into the book and claim piece in a subsequent webinar, so please keep your eyes open for that. However, we're always open to input and feedback, and if there's anything you'd like to hear about in particular, please let us know about it. I've taken up the idea of carbon offsets. I don't know that we had a whole lot dedicated to carbon offsets, but our VP of Operations, who runs these webinars, Beatrice Ash, she's on, and we'll be talking about trying to add something around the carbon offsets. So thank you for that input. Another question here. And I'll open this to Kerri and then to John, if you're aware of anything. I think, John, you might have mentioned it, but Kerri, to you first. This is any specific actions the airlines are doing that would also benefit BizAv? I'll turn that just slightly and say, as you were developing the plan for Adobe, did you come across, I don't know, might have been talking with FBOs or fuel providers or whomever, anything that you saw where BizAv was actually either drafting on or working with some of the commercial carriers around the sustainability piece, probably SAF in particular, but anything there, Kerri?
Right. Yeah, well, what comes to mind right now, I know that airlines are focusing on sustainability as well, and I got really excited to find out. So we're based in San Jose, we're in the Bay Area, and so I was really excited to hear that a group called Neste was going to be providing JetBlue out of SFO with SAF starting in 2021. And since then, so this was probably in February or March that I had heard about that. And so I got really excited thinking, oh, if it's at SFO, it's getting closer to San Jose. And then fast forward several months and you hear that now Signature at SFO is also working with Neste to make SFO a completely 100% SAF airport. And so I would say that that's a huge benefit for business aviation, not just at SFO, but that means that it's getting closer to other.
I think we.
And my under.
We lost. Yeah, we lost you there just a little bit, Kerri.
Can you hear me now?
John, I'll roll over to you, John.
Sure.
Anything that you've come across on the airline side that you see, particularly helping out BizAv, or vice versa?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Always do a sound check nowadays before we can start talking.
That's right.
Most repeated words, you're on mute. So I think, when we were doing ours, when we were working with our supply chain partners, Boeing has a research and design center in South Carolina, and we're based out of Atlanta. So as we're bringing this stuff across the country on rail cars, they were able to work with Boeing and supply it to them as well. So they are very active in that space with regards to designing the platforms. But also just before COVID hit, Delta Airlines made a public announcement that they were going to move to SAF for their entire fleet, their worldwide operations, which was a huge move. I mean, you could do the math and only guesstimate how many dollars that looked like, but I think that got derailed or delayed with the current airline industry struggles, but the commitment was there, and the ownership of knowing that we have to do this. So I think there's more and more to come, but I also think that the consumers are becoming more educated, and we have generations coming in now that are going to be looking at, when they buy their airline tickets, who's being environmentally conscious. So yeah, there is some traction there. We didn't work with an airline, and we kind of did our own thing, but hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and John, sticking with you as we kind of round out the hour here, one that came in, and I thought you might be kind of well suited to just follow on to that with this is, as you look back, you talked about some of the myths, price, availability, it's unsafe. For those in the audience that are, in the early stages of putting together a plan and possibly having some conversations, within their department, when you look back at what you went through, what would you say was the biggest concern as you looked at operating on let's talk about SAF, right?
Sure.
You're putting something in the, in the fuel tanks and the engine. I realize, not to say that getting away from paper in the cabin isn't an important part of this, but few things probably start to raise hackles around a flight department, like when you start throwing stuff in the fuel tanks.
Right.
What was the biggest concern of going with SAF in your flight department?
Great question. Look, it's the fear of the unknown. I wasn't so, obviously I have to be, responsible of making those decisions. So I ran all those traps. When I found out that the OEMs were doing this for years, and the airplane, was spent its first 60 days on SAF before it came to us, I got a lot more comfortable with it really quickly. And, look, there's a lot of smart people that have been working on this for a very long time, and the airlines aren't going to put their brand at risk. Any of the OEMs today are not going to put their brands at risk when it comes to that part of it. For me, it was the unknown of supplying it. what is the cost, right? Because no one was using it, and what's the real economic, risk here. And our company, I was very fortunate that they were willing to put their money where their mouth is. And so when I came to them with what the premium was to go to SAP, it was really a simple go for it response. But some companies don't have that privilege, and they're more fiduciarily governed, if you will, about what they can and can't do. And so, but I think the fear of the unknown was my biggest fear, and I just went and found the answers. And sometimes I just said there has to be an answer. It's you just got to crack the code and get to the right people with the right answers.
Well, I'd almost like to say that NorCal plugged that response, but we didn't. That was John being candid. But fear of the unknown, as we look to connect, inform, and grow, hopefully the lineup of sustainability and SAP webinars that we have over the next few weeks will help with that unknown. There is a lot of information. I will tell you, it was back at the San Jose Regional back in March when I was talking to someone that I found out that there are several OEMs that have been running their entire demo and delivery fleets on SAF for years. And, I'm fairly active in the industry, and I didn't realize that. So yep. I think as a lot of this information starts coming out, or just maybe gets a little bit more press, gets more airtime, it's certainly helpful to all of us. I'll mention there was one other question regarding baseline measuring between traditional Jet A and SAF. We don't have time today. That is something we're going to touch on. Again, I'll put a plug in here for our webinar that's on the 18th. We're going to dig into SAF and the supply chain in a bit more detail. Hopefully you all can join us. However, for both Kerri and John and all of us at NCBAA, I'm going to say we've got to wrap it here. Thank you again for joining us today. We're pleased to have the audience out there and let us hear. There's a short survey here at the end that we'd love to hear your feedback on things that you might like to hear us talk about or add to the sustainability program. So with that, back over to Lindsay. She's got a few things to wrap. And again, thanks for joining us today. Have a great Wednesday. Thank you. Lindsay?
Great. Thank you very much, Craig. And thank you, Kerri and John, as well. Great information today. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and it will be made available on our website at norcalbaa.org. We'll be posting any questions we received there as well. And like Craig said, there is a webinar. It'll just take 1 short minute to complete, and it should pop out to you as soon as we conclude the webinar. We really appreciate the feedback. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining us, and have a safe day.